So, Andrew Tate is no longer allowed to use his social media accounts, and now we have to do the whole cancel culture, free speech, conversation bullshit once again. If you haven't yet heard, Andrew Tate is a man so stupefied by his own mediocrity that he built a media empire around it, adding yet another item to the list of things men will do instead of going to therapy. He's one of these chodes who coaches other men on how to abuse and manipulate women, and introduces fun and engaging ideas to the public sphere, like whether women should be treated as property or not.
That's not what I said. I was talking about an OnlyFans company when that question was asked.
Oh, no, I wouldn't want to take you out of context. What did you actually say?
But I said that if a woman is going out with a man, she belongs to that man. That's his woman. So if she wants to do OnlyFans, she owes him some money because she's his.
Anyway, I thought this might be a good time to do a sort of broadly academic sketch of deplatforming so that we can maybe be a little more prepared when this inevitably happens again. I'll put sources for any data-driven claims I make in the description. Okay, so first things first, there is very little research on social media and its effects, and even less on deplatforming. There have been a couple of studies following deplatformed communities, and basically the results are this. Deplatformed people, communities, whatever, don't typically disappear. They tend to go elsewhere, they tend to become more toxic on sites like Gab and Parler, but their reach is cut way down. Social media just hasn't been around long enough for us to know its lasting effects, so it's really up in the air whether moving all the bigots to some horrible little moldy corner of the internet will make things better in the long run, and a claim in either direction would be unfalsifiable and therefore of limited use. That means that the only thing we can do is look at what we know about human psychology and our behavior in groups and sort of superimpose that onto what we know about the structure of social media and the kinds of information it privileges, and come to as well-informed a conclusion as we can that way. The arguments against deplatforming tend to boil down to four main ideas, two premises and two solutions. The first premise is what I call the cancer argument, the idea that banning specific bigots won't make bigotry go away. The second is what I call the martyr argument, this idea that banning Andrew Tate will only increase his reach and the reach of his ideas. These two premises result in two conclusions. The first is that toxicity feeds off attention, and so the correct response is no response at all. The other is that Andrew Tate's value should be publicly appraised in the free marketplace of ideas, and through that method, people will just organically reject him. There is one more really important one. It's the bad precedent argument, and it's worth enough consideration that I'm going to make an entire other minisode about it. So if you're out there hovering over your keyboard, ready to shout at me about how I ignored the bad precedent argument, just wait a couple weeks. It's kind of hard to overstate the significance of social media in human development. Most people with internet access use social media in some form. Most people on social media use it as a go-to method of communication, and a large percentage of people get their news from it, which is relevant because social media platforms have their own modalities, their own etiquette, and their own methods of prioritizing some kinds of information over others, depending on what the user shows a preference for. Social media is not a neutral force. And the reason that matters is because one commonality among all these ideas is that they assume social media is a neutral force. That makes sense because all of this stuff, these arguments, social media, capitalism itself, comes from Enlightenment philosophy. Values of logic, reason, democracy, self-determination, etc. There's a lot to be said for Enlightenment philosophy, but it has some serious drawbacks, chief among which is this. The human brain is not designed to maximize logic. The human brain is designed to maximize survival. These arguments depend on taking for granted the idea that all information is created equal when processed through the human brain, that presentation, tone, prejudice, none of that matters because humans are innately rational creatures that see through all attempts at deception and are born with finely tuned researching skills. Part of the reason social media is so addictive is because it takes advantage of the social survivalist parts of our brain that make it imperative that we know what our tribe is up to so that we can better figure out where we belong, so that we can feel more secure in our knowledge that if a man-eating lion rolls into the village, we can rely on other people to watch our backs. But Mariana, people like incels and anti-vaxxers are specifically countercultural. They're all about escaping the matrix. They're trying to go against the crowd. No. They're not going against the crowd, they are finding a crowd. They're using online spaces to curate a community that affirms opinions that would and usually do ostracize them in normal life, and then transforms those opinions from a pathological tendency to a social identity. The current and most common understanding of identity formation is basically as a confirmation bias feedback loop. Once the basic identity in the feedback loop is established, it becomes extremely hard to break, primarily because that break can be really emotionally stressful. There's a reason it's called an identity identity crisis. And when you see, for example, men on Reddit talking about their identity shift from red-pilled manosphere hate gremlin to normal person, the way they often describe it sounds like heartbreak. It's a real loss. It is extremely important that when some kid tippy-taps the name Andrew Tate into a search bar, the results aren't just an unending stream of simps for Andrew Tate. Because another thing we know about human behavior is that the more often people see something, the more likely they are to think that that thing is relevant and therefore a socially safe thing to entertain and eventually possibly adopt. That's one of the most basic rules of advertising. This is why echo chambers matter. I think a lot of people misunderstand the idea of an echo chamber to mean that people just don't come in contact with opposing information, and if they did, everything would be fine. The better product earns the most buyers in the free marketplace of ideas. No. Markets are based on rationality, and this is a problem based on emotion. Echo chambers matter because if you already sort of agree with the internal ideology, every new piece of information in an echo chamber serves to reinforce that initial identity until it is ironclad. I think this is why young men who already have a stake in particular gender roles can hear Andrew Tate describing women as property in explicit terms.
If a woman is going out with a man, she belongs to that man. That's his woman. So she wants to do OnlyFans. She owes him some money because she's his.
But ask no more questions just because he prefaces that statement with the empty rhetoric of,
that's not what I said. I was talking about an OnlyFans company when that question was asked.
Like, yeah, you never said the precise words in that order. You just described what property is. Similarly, this is why there is, at least that I've found, no evidence to suggest that deplatforming turns anyone into a martyr, at least to the extent that most people claim concern over, which is that banning them will actually extend their reach. If there's anything we absolutely have data to back up, it's that deplatforming makes the target's audience smaller every time. Social media is biased toward the present moment. It's not a comfortable place for archiving or constructing wide-scale historical narratives. Andrew Tate got banned last week, and this video is already a little dated because that news has been taken over by the Kiwi Farms news. What happens when we deplatform people is that they often go elsewhere, they often dig in deeper, they often get more toxic, but they remain niche. And in my opinion, that is the most important thing. Not only that we do what we can to remove opportunities to organize doxing and swatting and harassment, which are things that very much hamper free speech, but that we keep the ideas driving those efforts far away from the mainstream, because the point of deplatforming is not to solve bigotry. This is the cancer argument, the idea that things like misogyny, racism, and homophobia are matters of human development. Social media didn't create them, and banning them won't fix the problem. Society is the body, bigotry is the cancer, Andrew Tate is a symptom. We should address the illness at the core of our culture, not get all caught up in how they make themselves known online. I mean, tell me you don't know how chronic illness works without telling me you don't know how chronic illness works. Does banning Andrew Tate mean that he will be replaced by some other ultra-misogynist who coaches young men how to abuse and manipulate women? Yeah, it does. Nobody thinks that banning Andrew Tate will solve misogyny. The point is not to fix it. The point is to not make it worse. As an illustration, let's extend that cancer metaphor and make it match reality a little better. Let's say you have bone cancer. Bone cancer can make your bones very brittle and weak. So let's say you're moving a chair in your house, and as a symptom of your bone cancer, the act of moving a chair breaks your arm. You're gonna wanna go to an oncologist. You're gonna do some rounds of chemo probably. You're gonna address your cancer. It's the reason your arm broke. But you know what else you're gonna do? You're gonna fix the broken arm.